Welcome, Stacey Woodson, to the Dish with Dina podcast. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are, like me and like many of my previous podcast guests, a registered dietitian. So I'd love to start with learning a little bit more about who you are, what you do, where you're currently located, kind of like a little snippet, and then we'll dive a little deeper in the rest of our conversation.
Sure. So I am a registered dietitian, also a media consultant and a children's book author. I have been a dietitian for about 20 years, so a long time now. And I am currently located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
I know I've shared my story. I'm a second career as far as dietetics is concerned, and a lot of other people you are okay, so we have some things in common because I was going to say some people I've worked with and interviewed who knew from the get-go out of high school what they wanted to do and this was it, and I didn't even know what a registered dietitian was until my 40s. So walk us through a little bit about like your origin story. How did dietetics find you, or how did you find dietetics?
I found dietetics as I was applying to medical school. So I knew for a long time that I was interested in a career in health. Everybody that knew me knew I wanted to go to medical school. My original degree is in biology. And when I came out of school, organic chemistry kicked my butt. That put a long story short. So I was just like, you know what? I want a gap year. So I came out of school. My family was like, what are you doing? You're never going to go back to school. I was like, I am. And I took a job working at the University of Pennsylvania. I grew up in South Jersey. Yes, South Jersey, so that's like 20, 30 minutes. So I was living at home, working at the University of Pennsylvania in a neuroscience laboratory. So, side note, I was like the assistant that ordered all the supplies, but also I prepped the slides and experiments for the PhD students to do experiments on rodents. So like rats, mice. So I used to like cut the brains with like machinery and like put them on slides and dye them and all that kind of interesting stuff. So I am currently doing that, and I read an article about nutrition. And it blew my mind because although I'd always cared about health and wellness and I cared about what I ate, I never really thought about the quantity. So I'd never really considered calories. It wasn't really a discussion in my home about like nutrition very much. And so what that article did, it made me like open my eyes, like I should think about like how much of these foods that I'm eating. And I made some simple changes, like literally just ate less or like paid attention to how much juice I was drinking. I was just drinking so much juice. Anyway, and coupled with the fact that the parking around University of Pennsylvania was terrible. So I was walking to work because I moved from my mom's house and now had an apartment that was walkable, but it was still like a mile or so. So now I'm walking more and I'm eating less. And I drop a significant amount of weight, maybe 20 pounds. Not quite sure, definitely significant because people that hadn't seen me in a while would come up to me and be like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing?" But it was never my intent to lose weight. So I didn't keep a record of that. And at some point in time, as I'm interviewing, I was like, I think that this could be a career now that I know it exists because I had no idea previously. And I really started thinking, I was like, all right, I really want to help people. And what do I want to do as a physician? I want to help, I want to improve the lives of people. Right. And so I was like, I think I could do this in this career, considering most of the major chronic issues in this country have nutritional roots. And so I decided to go this route because I said my youth and my money won't always be here, but medical school will. So I was like, if I go this route, it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot faster, and I don't like it, I can always pivot and go back to medical school. And I went this route, and I have not had a traditional career by any means. Like, most dietitians work in a hospital setting or outpatient, but what I've done, I absolutely love.
Walk me through what the non-traditional is because I have made many jokes on this podcast over the past 5 years of doing this that I am a quote unquote entrepreneur, but really it feels like I'm working seven part-time jobs. So cobbling together a private practice, and also I'm the adjunct lecturer up here in the Bronx, where that's actually where I went back to school to get my degree, my credential, my internship. And then I also do little independent contractory things. And just like you said, you gave me some titles of things that you do in RD, but you're also a media consultant and you're also an author. So what is not conventional or not traditional about your current role, or as you were leading up to this point in time?
So one of the things when I did work like a 9 to 5, I was always the only dietitian, right? And so I realized that that was actually a blessing because I kind of had to make stuff up. Like a lot of dietitians I know, they work in, the nutrition department and they can bounce ideas off of other dietitians and be like, oh, what do you think about this patient or this client? And I didn't really have that. When I came out of school, and I actually, because I like to say I was a whole adult when I went back to school. I did a coordinated master's program, so I got my master's in clinical nutrition from NYU while simultaneously doing my internship at the VA Bronx, and it was a clinical like a heavily clinical program. And I knew I had no interest in doing clinical work, especially after going through that program. And so when I came back to Philadelphia, the first job that I had was in the corporate office of LA Weight Loss. And there was three dietitians there because half of the company had already closed before I got there. And they actually buckled like 8 months into my job. And I hated every minute of it. We would like answer phone calls from all the different weight loss offices throughout USA and Canada about why people's weight loss might be stalling. And then from there, I started teaching an adjunct class at one of the local universities for freshman nursing students. So I was teaching a nutrition class, which was a lot of fun. It's also where I got over my fear of public speaking. I was just like, these kids, they will rip you a new one. Like if you can teach a class, the kids, like you can do public speaking anywhere. So I did that. And then that company actually, like I said, they went under. So I'm just like, oh no, what do I do now? And then I took a job at an OB office. And so I was the only dietitian there. That was like my longest, what you could call traditional career. And so I worked there for a good 8, 9 years. But during that time, I started having my kids. And I was also doing side gigs. Like I would work for a company that did nutrition education, like group education. So I would do that on the sides. Any speaking engagements or presentations that kind of fell in my lap, I would do those things. And then found a company that was looking for a part-time outpatient dietitian. And so I took that on. But as I started having kids, I kind of scaled back from work completely. And then eventually I was like, okay, on baby number 3, like I now need a side gig. Like it's expensive. And I had made natural body care products. So once I became a mom, I really cared obviously about nutrition, but also my oldest daughter had eczema really badly. And I'd gone down the YouTube rabbit hole. And so now I'm like making stuff for my hair because I became natural. So wearing my hair out of the natural state. So I'm like looking at YouTube videos for that. And some of the creators that I would follow, they were making body care products. And I was just like, why not? I'm spending all this money for these expensive products to try to help my daughter's eczema. Why don't I try making like some body butter, some lotion? And I did that and it worked wonderfully. And from there, I was like, well, what else can I make? So I just started making most of the things that we use, like everyday products I make. And people were like, you should sell them. And I was like, no, I'm not selling them. I just make them for my house. But eventually I did. So that was my first like entrepreneurial journey, is selling the body care products. And the business was actually called Pause, which is my daughter's acronyms, the initials. And so I had 2 daughters when I started that. I now have 3 children. So that was the first venture. And then I realized very quickly that to make significant amounts of money, small items wasn't the way to go, because you have to move a lot of them to make money. And I don't have that type of time. And then my kids are getting older, and representation matters very much to me. And my kids would see like these book bags or t-shirts, and they were never kids that looked like them. So I decided that I was going to have a company called Melanated Magic Teas. And so I had t-shirts and book bags and just fun stuff with images or phrases that affirmed my children. So I really made it so my kids could have what I wanted them to have. And so I did that for a while, but then it got cumbersome, because anybody that has inventory, one, you have to store it in your house. But also, no matter what you have, somebody needs something different. So, you have a shirt in purple and they're just like, oh, do you have this in green? And oh, do you have this in this size? And I was just like, you know what? This is too much. And then flash forward to now, meanwhile, I'm also still doing like workshops and presentations in the background, still doing a handful of nutrition 101 here and there. And then the pandemic hits. And I had said when my middle daughter, who is now 11, when she was like 2, she became a picky eater. And I was just like, at that time, I remember thinking, like, this is wild. I have multiple degrees in nutrition. I can't imagine what other families are going through. And I have this professional background. Like, this is crazy. I should write a book about this. Like, I would love to write a silly book about picky eating. And so flash forward to 2020, I actually jumped into the homeschool world, and I had a few homeschool friends that had written children's books. And one of them had tagged me in a Facebook post about a free children's book masterclass. And the operative word here was free. So I was like, okay, I'll sign up. But I didn't really plan on going, right? And then I just happened to get an alert on my phone, which I don't usually get. Like, this was the universe. Like, and so I was like, all right, like, what am I doing? It's like the height of the pandemic. I'm home. So I tune in and I'm listening on day one. And my mind is blown because I was like, I absolutely can make this happen. So I attended the remainder of the week and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna have a book. But because the book in my head featured my family, so my family is illustrated into these stories, and my picky eater would be the protagonist, I knew that I couldn't just do that because I have 2 other children. So if I'm going to write a book, it's going to be a series. So I knew right away the series would be called Delicious and Nutritious. And I knew each one of my children would be the main character of a book. And each book in the series would be about food or nutrition or growing food, because those are the things that I care about. But each one was going to kind of have each of my children's energy. That's kind of how the series was born. And so the first one was my middle daughter. By the time I wrote the second book in the series, I'd realized, oh, what a fun way to include my daughter. And so she's the co-author of the second book in the series. And then each of the books has like an activity book that goes along with it. And the first book, it's called The Princess of Picky Eating Tries New Foods. I got some feedback very early on that because princess was in the title, there would be segments of the population that just wouldn't want to read it, even though the only reason why it's called The Princess of Picky Eating is because when I wrote the book, my daughter was in a phase that all she would do is wear a tiara in the house or a princess dress or both. So it's just about the illustrations. That's it. It doesn't talk about princesses in the text. And so I flipped it. And I also have a second version of that book, exactly the same, except for the main character and like the background and maybe his room. And the main character's name is Stanton. And it's called The Prince of Picky Eating Tries New Foods. I also have an ABC book, which was just from feedback from people that were just like, these books are so much fun, but I'd love something for early readers or pre-readers. So it's an ABC book called A is for Aki, Fruits and Vegetables from Around the World. And it's literally fruits and vegetables from all around the world, because as a mom, I know that parents like to read books that are fun for them too. So I wanted to make it engaging and everybody learn something new. And then finally, I'm in the process of illustrating. It's been a long time. This book has been written for a long time, just didn't get around to it. My son's book. So hopefully that will be available later this year or the beginning of 2026. So that's just a little bit about my author journey. But in between, there's so many things that have happened and so many projects that I've worked on.
Well, as usual, I'm scribbling notes everywhere, and the direction I see this going in right now, there are themes that kind of are somewhat prevalent in a lot of these discussions, regardless if I'm interviewing dietitians or not, about allowing things to unfold in front of you. You knew what you didn't want to do, but you didn't maybe necessarily know where the direction of how this would lead you from point A to point Z or point B in the first iteration of where you saw yourself going. And I think, Stacey, what I find is really important, because we have a lot of things in common. I'm also a teacher, and I also work with students, and I also work with dietetic interns as well. And I think it's important to let them see that it's not always that traditional approach. They don't always have to kickstart everything from the clinical standpoint, even though that is what we are trained in. You don't have to specialize in those things. And above that, you can even offshoot like you did with actual product stuff or authoring things or whatever your heart desires. Can you speak to us a little bit about that fearlessness and kind of taking the chances and allowing the, however you want to call it, the universe, the things that are lining up in front of you to take you into the direction and maybe the confidence that it takes to feel like I'm going to be okay with seeing where this goes and not really worrying, or were you worrying at all through any of the process there?
I mean, I definitely would say that I was worried. And looking back, it really is like a strong belief in yourself, but it didn't feel like that at the time. It was just like, you know, how they say if there's no seat at the table for you, you just make it. Like I want my kids to see that happen. Like if there's a problem, you can create a solution. And that's pretty much what I did. Like when it came to the products, I made them. If nobody bought them, nobody bought them. There was not that much loss, right? Like it would take years for me probably to get through the inventory in my household, but it wasn't a significant um investment. And I think the biggest thing is I've learned in my years that one, I know nothing, right? Like the older I get, I'm like, the less I know, the less I realize that I know. And two, that there's very few things in life that you can't course correct. So you try something and it doesn't work, you can always pivot. Very, very few things in life. And so I want my kids to see that. And now I look back on all those things and it was like it was a stepping stone, all of those things, having to be creative, having to make things up by myself because there was nobody to always ask guidance has led me to where I am today. And I literally like that's my job. I make stuff up all the time. Like I'd send all kinds of proposals for things and like I came up with a proposal for a presentation that I proposed yesterday and I was like, "Oh, that was a great idea." I had no idea I was going to do that last week, right? I just made it up and hopefully the proposal will get accepted. Um, but it definitely positioned me. And so now my nickname is the Earth Center Dietitian. And like it's really just interesting to me like all these different areas that I have worked on I was able to kind of bring them together and marry them into something that's what is unique. I don't know anybody else that does exactly what I do. Like I know dietitians that are in agriculture, and I know dietitians that are in like the culinary world, and I know some that are even crossover, but I don't know anybody that really talks about the cultural piece, how to grow the food and teaching people how to do that if that's something that they want, and talking about the stories of food along with using foods that you have in your kitchen to heal yourself. Like so all of those things, telling the stories of food, showing you how to grow it, talking about the science, it's just this thing that I've created that I absolutely love.
I want to talk about a couple of things about that. First of all, especially in the dietetics world too, I live in New York City, very diverse community, and I teach up in the Bronx, as you are familiar with up there too. Very diverse community. As a dietitian, though, working in telehealth where I'm meeting complete strangers, they'll often come and say, my doctor told me I can't have rice anymore. And I laugh at this because A, like rice is a global staple. Like, what are you doing? Number two, how dare you take things away from people that connect them to their cultural heritage, their food ways, their traditional meals? What is it about, do you think, what is it about maybe this new generation of dietitians that you're seeing that really do support this patient-centered approach, the representation? And maybe I'm coming it from a different standpoint. I feel like there's a shift. I know I've worked in health centers before where people are very old school, here's a piece of paper, follow this, stop drinking soda and cut out this and cut out that. And it feels very, very restrictive versus having that more open assessment and capability within ourselves too as healthcare professionals. Would you mind speaking a little bit more about that as well? Like where you see some shifts happening, or maybe where there aren't shifts happening that you can, and we can maybe talk to the future dietitians and the current dietitians who might need a little caressing in that way as well.
So I want to take a step back and just
Yeah.
say that when I was, as somebody that's been a dietitian for a really long time, I was trained in the traditional way. Like when I came out of school, I would have been one of those dietitians being like, "Oh, swap to brown rice." And it's much like motherhood. Like when you're in it, you're like noticing like people like, like you're giving them a gut punch. And then they're not able to follow the recommendations. And it didn't feel authentic. And at some point in time, I realized the lens of which these things are being fed they're very individualistic, right? And so like once you start to pull away and okay, by talking about science, right? We are a field that is backed by science. So we want to talk about the science, but we're essentially saying that all these things that have had people exist for many years, even though it's not documented, doesn't exist, right? So, or it's not good enough because we don't have the science behind it. And I just started thinking about that. I was like, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make sense. And then also when we look at food, like going back to your example with white versus brown rice, this is an example that I use all the time because it makes me angry, is that if we look at white and brown rice, what are the things that are really the difference? The things that are really the difference is there's some vitamins and minerals that are going to be different, and there's some fiber that the fiber content is going to be different. And as you start to look at these global communities that use white rice as their base, and as you mentioned, if it's been a staple in a community for centuries, there's a reason why people are thriving, not just surviving, thriving, right? And so when you look at it, cultures that use white rice, they eat an insane amount of vegetables, right? So they're getting those nutrients that would be missed from those other foods that we're eating. We're not eating foods in a vacuum. So if you want to look at foods in a vacuum, sure, that makes sense, but that's not the way people eat. And so I always tell people, what are you eating with your white rice? Are you eating beans? Are you eating vegetables? If so, enjoy your white rice and don't feel guilty about it at all. And so when we think of it that way, and I think that these newer generations, going back and answering your questions, I think that the newer generations of dietitians have two things going for them. Is one, they have like social media and different platforms to be able to share their voice. And then their voices are heard and people are affirming what they're saying, resonates with them. And they're just like, oh, I'm on to something. Right. I had a conversation with one of my seasoned dietitian friends. And this is when we started like pitching more presentations and stuff. Like we're seeing like these younger dietitians at conferences and, they've been in practice 5 years. And we're just like, why aren't we doing these things? This doesn't make any sense. Like we have knowledge as well to share, but they have that that platform and people are responsive. So it's one thing. And also I just feel like our world is changing. Then that people of color are just like, we matter too. And we're making spaces for those voices. So I think that that's really the shift. And it's important because if you keep doing something the same way, you're just going to get left behind. People are no longer going to listen to you. And these worksheets, like they're great if it's somebody that likes a worksheet. Like even now for me, it'll be information that's very useful and I want to keep. And I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to take a picture of the worksheet because I know I'm going to have my phone. I'm going to lose this worksheet. So you got to kind of evolve with the times if you want to stay relevant and you really want to help people in present day where data, things that are electronic, that that is just the way the world works now.
I always appreciate this conversation, and again, coming from it from, uncomfortable but necessary conversations too, of empowering the patient population, of being able to feel comfortable to ask for things, to also give feedback too if I'm not being heard. That can be kind of tricky. And of course, I'm saying it from maybe a more privileged standpoint where I am being listened to because of my skin color, but maybe I also have issues of my gender versus what a male counterpart might be dealing with too. And so I think that's a very tricky thing also, Stacey, of giving people that empowerment of letting them know like we're here to support you when they have constantly been battling up against, but I that's not the reaction that I am getting, of how do they find that community building, how do they find that network of people that if they feel safe and protected around. And I I know for my students, like I keep saying to them, as much as you keep reading things in textbooks, the textbooks are a very general, generic overview of all the things. You know, you can't keep saying on page 49, this is what I'm going to regurgitate when I'm meeting with somebody. You really, like you mentioned, you really have to meet people where they're at. If they're coming at it from an educational standpoint or a financial standpoint or relationship standpoint or whatever their connection is. Now, I think the issue there, whether or not we're working in a more traditional sense of like clinical practice or outpatient stuff, but sometimes people only get so much time with their healthcare provider and dietitians too. Like not every insurance covers, 90 minutes of sessions, or they might only have 3 visits and that's it. What do you feel might be a good approach, maybe coming from the new generation of dietitians? Like what might be the good approach of being able to get that quality assessment and level of care that we need to do to like, remove some of not necessarily the biases, but the things that we've just been trained on, this kind of like, again, that regurgitating information of allowing ourselves to open up a little bit. I have my ideas, but I want to hear your ideas as well.
One thing that I is huge in my practice is understanding people's why. I can't stress that enough. Yeah. So like I had a client, I don't know, it was this week or last week, and my practice is anti-weight loss. And I say that because I'm not against people losing weight. I'm against that we're going to sit down in a session and we're going to talk about how do you lose weight, right? And so she wants to lose weight. And I told her, I was just like, that's what I'm not going to do. And I said to her, why do you want to lose weight? And then she was like, well, my knees want to feel better and I have these issues. And I was like, so that's what we're going to focus on, right? And then from that, making these shifts, weight loss might be a consequence of, of those shifts. But if you felt better and you look better and the number on the scale didn't change, how would that make you feel? And a lot of times people haven't even considered that. They've only considered that the only way to look and feel better is that the number on the scale changes. And I'll see them be like, oh, like that is a possibility, right? Like maybe you're losing inches. So that's one of the conversations that I always have is like, I want to know your why. And if there's been things, I also like to ask people their glows. So things that they're doing well in our session, and their grows, things that they're not doing well or aren't able to achieve. And I want to know why. So why weren't you able to stick to that goal? What was the problem? Because that's where we really need to do the work. And sometimes it's the way that they structure their day. Once I know their why or what's their roadblock, then I like to make a plan A goal, a plan B goal, and a plan C goal. Right? Because plan A is great, but this is already something you're struggling with. There might be some issues. So what do you do when that issue arises? Right? You already have that plan in place. That's where people like they lose it because they don't have a secondary thing to do. So like, for instance, this particular client, we were talking about meal prepping. And I was just like, okay, I think meal prepping is a great idea. Like why has it been so hard for you to consistently do? And she was like, it's just so much food that I have to prep. And it's not just for me, it's for my mom and my daughter. And I was just like, so what I'm hearing is it just takes an intense amount of time and energy and effort for you to prep for the week. So what if we don't prep for the week? What if we break that up? What if we do it 2 or 3 times? She's like, no, not 3 times. And I was like, okay, what about 2? And she's like, I can do 2 times. So now it's not as much time in the kitchen, right? But she was like, the Sunday prep would be okay, but that Wednesday prep, sometimes I have meetings, sometimes I'm just tired. And I was like, all right, that's reasonable. So what are we going to do if it's one of those days that you just don't feel like it? How are you going to nourish yourself? So then she had her quick meal that was still something that was pre-thought out. We realized it's going to meet her energy goals. It's going to meet her nutrition goals, right? So she said she's going to grab a rotisserie chicken and do some frozen vegetables. Perfect. And then I asked her, okay, so what if you're having a really challenging time and you do that a lot and you get bored with that? What's your backup to your backup? And we walked through that. So now she's leaving and she knows that, okay, this is what I'm planning to do. But if there's any issues, I have ways to work around it and I don't have to completely fall apart. So I work in plan A, B, and C. If there are situations, I always ask whys. The whys are so important though, because they're things that you might not even think about. Like if you're telling somebody to drink more water and maybe they haven't paid their water bill and they don't have water. And so, you're just like, we've talked about drinking sodas or we talked about drinking juice. Maybe they're getting juice on Wick, right? That's what they have. That's the beverage that they have. And you're talking to them about drinking water. So you have to ask, like, why do you drink this juice? Like, and you have no idea what's going to come out of it. But there's been so many times when I've asked why, and I'm just so surprised by the answer. And I'm just like, oh, well, that makes sense. Like, I'm not going to judge you because you're doing the best you can with the resources that you have.
I agree with all of that. And as you're talking too, like I'm thinking in my training and maybe in your training too, I'm not sure exactly like you were saying, it feels like it's somewhat similar because the curriculum is the curriculum. But I know when I came out of it going, okay, I feel like I'm going to hit the ground running and I'm so excited to get started. And I was very much like, print this out and hand it to somebody, print this out and hand it to somebody. And it was only with experience. And I think that's something too that I want to encourage because we do have a lot of dietetic students and nutrition students listening to this, but also just anyone out there doing anything for the first time, it's going to take time for you to understand how to be better at your job or to grow your skills. So allow that flexibility and allow that insight too. Don't be thinking that you have to have all the answers and talking at someone. The discussion is mutually beneficial. So like Stacey, you were saying, when you're asking the why, right? Even sometimes if we're coming in it with preconceived notions, because on paper, people might look the same, but when they actually get in front of you, there's a whole bunch of different things that are taken into account, the different environmental factors, the social determinants of health, as you were mentioning too, with whatever their access or in access might be there, but also what they see as goals and the deeply rooted reasons behind that, whether it's trauma, whether it's chronic dieting, whether it's because whatever is quote unquote socially acceptable. And for us to really peel that away, I think helps us grow as the healthcare provider to become better and stronger and also provide that protective, safe space for people to feel their best in. And also allows them to maybe, kind of like breathe and shed whatever stressors that they might be coming in thinking, oh, I only had this one particular thought and now you're making me as the patient or the client you're making me kind of like dive a little bit deeper. And so that's what I love also about this profession. We're trained as medical nutrition therapists, right? That's the MNT part. We don't really see ourselves as quote unquote therapists. We're not in that scope of practice, but there is a lot of counseling that we're doing to help break those barriers down. And I think the more we get experiences in the different patient populations, but even if people are specializing in something, you're still seeing a wide variety of humans. Everybody is so complex. And to allow yourself to have that again, that mutually beneficial, that two-sided discussion of allowing that to kind of guide the direction in which the outcomes are, and also providing, like you mentioned, providing the empowerment to the patient too, of being like, see, you can do this. It cannot just be that one particular thing that you're focusing on. Or if you can't do what we set out for plan A and B, at least you have a plan C. I absolutely love all of those options. And I wish, everybody would come into this field knowing that without feeling like they have to strategize with just like one direction or this is the printout, the handout that we're given. Coming at it from the patient standpoint too, Stacey, like would you say if somebody has not had the best history with their previous providers? I ask a lot of times, like, have you ever worked with a dietitian before? Sometimes they'll say yes, and I'll say, what was that experience like? Can you walk us through a little bit maybe about what the questions they could ask of who to get quality care from, like especially if they have the luxury of being able to pick and choose out of a directory or find people online? What do you think that they should be prepared with knowing about the value of a dietitian?
Mm,
Yeah.
wow. So that's such a good question. I will say, well, actually, I want to add this to our previous discussion that the one thing that I love about dietetics, and this is especially for the interns or anybody interested in the field, is that even though we have degrees in nutrition, everybody has their own experience with nutrition. Like it's not like being an engineer. Like if somebody talked to me about engineering, I would have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. Everybody has an experience with food. So it is a place for us to learn as well. So that's one of the things that I love. I learn from my clients all the time. I'm also a huge advocate of getting providers that are going to support your needs. And I usually tell people to start with people that they trust, right? And look for recommendations in that way. I know that's how I find my providers. But when a provider gives guidance and you don't know anything about it? Well, first, I would say I always like to have people to have questions. Go in with questions, especially if it's a new diagnosis. Don't just listen to what your providers are saying. I often say providers are very much like parents. You want what's best for your child, but the way that you go about it might be very different, right? And so we all want our patients to thrive, but like how we get them there might be different, and the fit does not always work with everybody. And if you get an answer, or maybe they're not writing off on a procedure or a test that you're asking for, there's other doctors. You do not have to take no for an answer. I mean, there was one patient that I had many years ago, and this is also why having doctors with a cultural background is so important. So this was a Black woman, and so often we speak with our eyes. And so she's telling me what her doctor said. And I'm just like, and I'm trying to keep a straight face. I think my face is straight. And I'm just like, and she doesn't say anything to me then. But she had diabetes for many years. She wasn't on medication. The doctor was just like, oh, well, wait and see. And like, none of it's making sense in my mind, but I don't want to disparage her doctor. And so she was like, after that session, I immediately went and got a second opinion. And she was on a completely different regimen. She was diagnosed with diabetes, ended up on medication. Her blood sugars look so much better. And she's just like, and I thank you for it. And I was just like, why? She was like, when I saw your face, I knew something wasn't right. And I was just like, oh, like, I'm glad that you got the care that you needed. So, I try my best to advocate, like, you know, if this doesn't feel good for you, maybe you want to consider a second opinion. I never outright say, like, I don't think that this is the proper care process, but I definitely softly lay that out there. And depending on the practice, like the practice area that they need help with, I might have personal suggestions on providers that I think would be a good fit. And if not, I tell people really to start with their network.
The key word for me here was questions on both ends. I am like you where okay, so maybe I'm a little bit different, that I probably will go, wait, what? What did he tell you? I do question doctors out loud. But I try to do it in a very civil, respectful way. I'll say, I'm curious about why that is the plan, or why they mention that to you. If you want, you can put them in touch with me and I can have a conversation. If you feel like releasing that information, that's fine. B, you can, the next time you go there, I would maybe draw out some questions for the patient to come with, because again, you don't know what you don't know. And I come from, we're all patients ourselves too. I come from a history of gastrointestinal issues and mental health issues. And I would just be like, okay, well, you're the doctor, you must know everything. And I've come to learn that's not always the case. And some people, again, depending on how their practice is, or depending on their personal and professional development of what they are open to with that patient-centered care, they might not always be coming from that direction appropriately, or maybe it's like outdated stuff that they're not necessarily keeping up on, and things have changed over time. So I feel like you. I feel like I might not give the side-eye glance, but I might say I'm curious about that. And so again, in these discussions on the podcast here, we're coming at it from a variety of different ways. The healthcare provider's perspective, the upcoming nutrition student dietetic intern's perspective, and the patient's perspective too, that we want you to be comfortable to get second opinions, or if you don't know, if you leave an office without really understanding, they didn't even educate you on your diagnosis, or they gave you a list of things like don't ever eat these things again, and you're like, dang, that's a long list, like should I just never eat anything? Or they've taken away some of your culturally appropriate foods, like it's okay to say I'm curious as to why, or I would like a second opinion, or to develop that interdisciplinary team, which is where dietitians can step in too, much like cardiologists and endocrinologists. We're here to support you and come at it from different perspectives. And I think really investing in that quote unquote team, sometimes that feels like a luxury, and sometimes I realize people can't always take off work to go see their specialist, or their insurance might only cover, like I said before, maybe a handful of visits here, a handful of visits there. But the more information you can collect about your personal insight, I think the better positioned you are as a patient. And also, again, from the healthcare providers, I love when people take notes during my sessions. I love when they come with labs and go, here's what I just got. Can you help me go through all these things? I love, love, love that. And I want to continue to encourage people to take notes and to come with questions. So thank you for sharing that, Stacey. That's very important, I believe. Appreciate that. And I'm glad that that person was able to get the care that they needed. Let's talk about a current week in the life of you. Tell me a little bit about how you coordinate stuff. I love learning about people's productivity tools and systems, like how we discipline ourselves to stay within our own self-care and set boundaries. And that's kind of themes that come up a lot in these discussions as well. How do you manage all the things when you're juggling all the things and you're also a human trying to juggle your own responsibilities and your family too?
I have to say, this is something that I completely struggle with. So it's a bit of organized chaos. My summer schedule is a little bit different than my typical schedule. And actually, the fall is going to be a new, I'll say I'm a homeschool mom. So with that, I don't have a lot of time. And how I said I would structure my days is I get up fairly early and would start working when my kids are still sleeping. So the beauty that I've had as a homeschool mom, I can let my kids go to bed as late as I want and start my day whenever I want with them. So if they sleep in a little bit later, that's actually better for me. I would get up early and work usually anytime between 6 and like 10 a.m. was like my goal. It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes there's other things that I'm doing in there. But 10 a.m. is when I wanted to start our school day. Now, once again, didn't always work like that. So 10 to 12 is when I would budget time to do like the things that they needed me with. So whether it's instruction of new material or just something where I needed to be face to face with them. So that's when I would budget that in. And then at noon, we would like break for lunch. And then the afternoon would be when what I like to think of as quiet time. So this is when you could finish up things that you still needed to do. You could color, you could read, but you are on your own. We're still both here. Well, we're all here. And so like from 2 to 4, that's how I would structure my day. Then after 4, it was just who knows what happens. But it didn't always work like that. Now, as far as management, I consider myself what I call it. I have squirrel brain. Like I'll have this great idea. If I don't write it down, it's gone. It is gone. So I always have a planner that I write in. I just like that I process better as I write, but I never use this stuff that I write down because I would always lose it. Like even now I have like all these little post-it notes on my desk. So if it's really important, now I realize I have to write it in my planner or I will never see it again. But what has been really useful is utilizing my Google Drive. And so I started a document and I just brain dumped the document. And this is one of those things that I didn't notice before, but now it's going to make sense after our previous conversation. And I update it every week and it'll say week of. And these are I have an A, B, and C list. That's what I didn't realize how. It's like, wait, I do this with myself too. So I have an A, B, C, and list. And so the A list are the things that have to get done that week. B's are things that maybe they need to be done next week. They're fairly urgent, but not really urgent. And C's are things like, maybe they're big projects or ideas I'd like to accomplish over the next few months, weeks, whatever. And so they'll move up if they don't get checked off. But that has been really, really beneficial for me because I would set like a to-do list for the day. And then I wouldn't get through the to-do list and I would be so like, just like, oh, you're not getting anything done. But when I look at it through the week, I can get these things done if I'm not attached to being it done for it not being done a specific day, unless, a deadline is approaching. So that has worked really, really well for me.
I'm like you. I like a little bit of analog and digital, and I am a huge fan of not keeping too much in my brain. So I dump a lot. And when I look back at things, it's actually amazing to see how much content and information and big ideas I have. I am coming to terms. Not that it's like the end of my life, but honestly, like who can tell when the end of life is? But the point is as I'm getting older, I'm realizing I don't know if I have like the energy or the brain power to want to pursue some of those things. And that is actually making me feel like I'm focusing even more on the things that really matter. Like what is most important that I get done in the next 6 months or year or 2 years of my life that I want to see accomplished versus some big ideas that I can maybe start scratching off at some point. Or if I get to it, it'll be like a bonus. So I absolutely love the brain dump approach. I like the checklist things too. And I think that's a really important message too, Stacey, of just because it's on the list doesn't mean it has to get done. And if you can coordinate ways of saying like, again, prioritizing things that are maybe more time sensitive or if somebody's relying on you to do something so that the next step can happen, obviously prioritize that. But allow yourself to understand, and this is with any goal in life, we underestimate or overestimate different things. Like we don't realize how long stuff actually takes to do, or sometimes little things that can get done really quickly. We forget, like, oh, let me do, like, right, well, let me throw a load of laundry in and just get that out of the way as a simple example. So I think this also speaks to who we are as people, like how we work best. Like you mentioned, you know yourself in certain energy levels, different times of day. Other people might be night owls and they thrive at the end. So while sometimes we have some constructs around us, like if we're going to school or following somebody else's schedule, or we have a traditional work setting, we might have to adhere to that. But the more you kind of tap into your own understanding of who you are, I think that does help you with becoming more productive and being able to accomplish more things, and also just kind of like learning and growing and being compassionate with yourself because you know what benefits you, what things are maybe a little bit more of the boundaries that you might have to set with yourself or with others. So I very much appreciate that insight and a little bit of an insight into who you are and how you work best. So thank you for sharing that.
It's seriously considering having days that have themes. So like if I have clients scheduled or meetings scheduled, it really does affect my creativity. So I think I'm just gonna like start having like client days, like creative days. Like this is whenever I'm thinking of proposals or whatever. And I think that might be a game changer for me.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. As it is for me right now, when I look at my schedule at a glance, there are definitely days that I'm seeing clients, definitely days that I'm teaching. I don't have a flex day or an off day where I can just focus on business building or creating content or materials or whatever. I try to squeeze things in, and you're absolutely right. It's like to switch the brain back and forth is not working. It actually feels quite fatiguing to me to do that, to have to sit there and go, I'm on and then I'm off, and now I'm requiring of myself a different version of what I need to make this
Yeah.
quality. So maybe you've inspired me to do the same too, of
Yeah.
not chopping up together and instead creating just like a separate day of just, breathing
Yeah.
space around that and focusing on that. I always like to talk a little bit about hot topics. Is there anything currently that you're noticing, either as a hot topic, a current trend, something that either grinds your gears that you want to kind of clarify or disclaim, or something that you feel really excited about that you want to share as far as whatever, whether it's technology, social media, trends, things that you're seeing in your current life?
For me, I will say the thing that comes to mind right now is how I'm trying to phrase it in a way that people that aren't necessarily growers of food would understand, but like how our food and nutrition overlap. Like there's some natural overlap, but there's a lot of things that people don't realize because they're not they don't grow food. And so for example, like one of the things that you will see more in the future, it's not trendy at the moment, but it will become more and more trendy, is like eating flowers. Like if you follow me on social media, I'm always encouraging somebody to eat flowers, right? And people will be like why would you want to eat flowers? One, because they're beautiful, right? And I always talk about that our mental health is so, so important. So whenever I work with clients and give presentations or one-on-one, I always try to peel back that shame. I find that a lot of people feel like they are underperforming and lack willpower. And my most strongest statement to them is there are very few people that truly lack willpower. They're trying to function within a system that's built to make you to extract your labor, essentially. You have to work harder to get more things, and you just have to keep going. So you're in a system that's not meant for you to thrive. And so when you're saying you can't make meals, well, that's because you're exhausted. Like, so I take the shame off and let them know that they're not the problem. You just don't have the support that you need. You don't have the time. Maybe it's not the resources. Maybe it's not the knowledge, whatever it is. It's not a you problem. It's a system problem. So once we can look at that, that becomes like oh, wait, so if I have to work in this system, how can I best go about this goal, whatever it is? So the shame piece, I think we're going to hear more about. Also, when we talk about like the food that comes to our plates, it's about people making money. At the end of the day, farmers need to make money, and they're not going to sell things that don't sell to the public. There is, so now I'm about to go down my rabbit hole, but vegetables are a man-made thought. So most people have never really sat down and thought about that. A vegetable is a part of a plant, and we call it a vegetable. And so I like to have that conversation about nutrition so people can really understand what's happening. If we're eating a seed or a nut, right? That a seed or a nut contains a baby embryo and the food for an embryo. So it's going to be really nutritious. That's why we eat them. It's going to have cardio supportive fats. And so like I like to talk about like how these different parts of a plant are actually nourishing us. And then you see people's like eyes like click and they're just like, "Oh, this makes sense." Like like a stalk of a plant or the stem, it's going to be high in hydration because it transports water and nutrients to different parts of the plant. What are those? It's asparagus, it's celery. So all that to say, what I'm kind of giving you like different pieces of this, but at the end of the day, if you know anything about most plants have flowers, and the flower is right before it goes to seed or produces its fruit. It takes a lot of energy for the plant. Because of that, they are really rich in antioxidants. So it's a beautiful way to get some extra antioxidants, some extra beauty, but they're also very fragile. And most people don't know that flowers are edible. A lot of flowers are edible. And so you don't see them in the marketplace. And so I do think that is going to be something that we see more and more because there's more of a demand for these types of things. And if you go to like food shows, you'll see like different products that contain more flowers. But that's something that I'm a huge proponent of is eating more flowers, even if it's just in a tea blend, like a floral tea blend.
This is so fascinating to me because when you deconstruct the makeup of something and you really get to understand it a little bit better, this is with anybody. If anybody says, I don't eat particular things or this doesn't sit well with me, it's like, okay, but what does it actually literally and figuratively bring to the table? So see what else out there has those things and integrate that in there. Like you can absolutely substitute and mix and match. And I very much love the bringing of different things like herbs and spices in general, seasonings, different flavors. And in my case, I've only ever really eaten flowers in a restaurant where they use it as, pretty garnish or something, and they're edible. And it's like, what? This is crazy. But yeah, hello, it's still a plant. And if you're, like you said, if you're deconstructing it and understanding botanically what it provides to you, I think this is from a conversation I remember having a while back, and also one of the culinary workshops I attended. You get that connection to the ground, the connection to your environment and to the planet. And then I hope it also brings more of that gratitude and more of that connection because we are in the way that we work, the grind, the system is set up that we're go, go, go. We don't actually get to sit down and just have that mindful approach and to have something very nutritious, but also flavorful and beautifully presented on our plates. Like, isn't that just so lovely to sit down and be like, thank you so much, planet Earth, for providing this? Or if you played a role in it, like you were saying, Stacey, if you are the gardener, if you are the one that is a community plot, or you have a backyard mini garden, or whatever it is that you literally have your hands in, I think that also allows us to connect that deeply with it too. So I very much appreciate that discussion. No pun intended, but I feel like we're getting a taste of a lot of different things that you work in and around. And I'm really hoping at some point in the future I can get a part two discussion out of you because I'd like to dive a little deeper, but it's like you've touched upon so many different things. Having said that, is there anything that we didn't cover?
I will leave with this. The most basic nutrition information that I give anyone is a focus on adding and not subtracting. So always think about what you might need more of and add some of that in. Don't worry about all the other stuff that needs to change. Just move forward, add, and deal with other stuff later.
And that, can I just say philosophically, this makes me feel really warm and fuzzy because we often have that limiting mindset. And that is, I think, directly related to how we look at things. I always have to restrict my diet. I have to be less if I am trying to be at a table. I have to be less at my work meetings and to think more abundantly of bringing things in. We don't often think of what am I missing in my life? What should I add to it? So I hope that's almost kind of like a analogy for what other people, what everybody else can think of in their life in general, not just on their table, on their dinner table, but also in general. Thank you so much for that, Stacey. My final two-part question, my little pun intended two-part question. We are currently right now in kind of like the early afternoon of our recording. So after we disconnect, what is on your plate today, Stacey? What is the next thing you're working on professionally or personally? And then what is the next meal that you'll be eating today?
So I'll start with the meal because that's easy one. I made a salad last night with our fish tacos and there's leftover salad and I don't want to have to think about it. So I'm going to eat that. What is on my work agenda? I always have so much. I will say that when we end this call, I'm probably going to go work on a proposal for a presentation that I'm doing, and I would like some sponsors. So reaching out to a few different companies that align with the organization that I'll be presenting for.
That sounds delightful, and I am excited to see where all of this goes for you. You are not deprived of any big ideas, and I can only imagine what the future holds for you. So I can't wait to see more of the things that you put out there into the world and how you are of service to other people. I mean, there's so much great quality that you're putting out there, and I'm so excited to see who connects with you to really be able to receive that message and receive what you're giving to them. So thank you so much for spending time with me today, Stacey. It was such a pleasure having you.
I enjoyed myself. Thank you for having me.